He was the heir to a billion-dollar empire, a man who could buy anything except a conscience. She was a waitress invisible to his world, just another part of the scenery he owned. But on one rain-lashed Tuesday night, in the heart of a city that worships wealth, a single cruel word, useless, became the spark that ignited a firestorm. It was an insult that cost her a job, but it would cost him an empire. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how a single moment of casual cruelty set in motion a chain of events so dramatic, so twisted, that it would bring a titan to his knees and change a forgotten woman's life forever. The Gilded Sparrow wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater. And every night, Chloe Sullivan played her part. At 24, she had mastered the art of the silent, efficient phantom. She could navigate the narrow channels between tables laden with crystal and silver, with the grace of a dancer. Her smile a carefully constructed mask of pleasant neutrality. She could anticipate the needs of the city's elite before they were even aware of them themselves. A refilled glass of water, a fresh napkin, the swift and silent removal of a finished plate. Her performance was flawless, honed by 4 years of desperate necessity. Chloe's life existed in the stark, unforgiving contrast between the opulent world she served and the one she inhabited. The Gilded Sparrow, with its vaulted ceilings, plush velvet booths, and ambient lighting designed to make everyone look like a movie star, was a universe away from her cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a less fashionable part of the city. The rent for that apartment was a constant gnawing anxiety, a beast that had to be fed every month without fail. It was for her and her younger sister Sophie, a bright, bubbly 16-year-old who deserved a world far bigger than the one Chloe could currently provide. Their parents were a faded memory, lost in a car crash years ago, leaving Chloe as Sophie's sole guardian, a responsibility she bore with a fierce, unwavering love that was both her anchor and her heaviest burden. Her dream, the one she nurtured in the quiet, stolen moments of the early morning before her shift, was to be a photographer. Her old second-hand camera was her most prized possession. Through its lens, she found a way to frame the world not as it was, but as it could be. She captured the raw, unfiltered beauty of the city's underbelly, the weary lines on an old man's face, the defiant bloom of a flower growing through a crack in the pavement, the fleeting, joyful chaos of children playing in a fountain. These were the stories she wanted to tell, stories of resilience and quiet dignity. But dreams she knew all too well didn't pay the bills. So she played her part at the Gilded Sparrow, a ghost in the machine of someone else's luxury. Harrison Davenport knew nothing of such struggles. He was born into a world where the machine worked exclusively for him. As the only son of Jonathan Davenport, the ruthless real estate mogul behind the omnipresent Davenport Holdings, Harrison's reality was shaped by effortless acquisition. The city skyline was a testament to his family's power, each gleaming skyscraper a monument to their name. At 26, Harrison wore his entitlement like a bespoke suit. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with a jawline that seemed carved from granite and eyes the color of a winter sky, cold and dismissive. He moved with the languid confidence of a man who had never been told no, a man for whom the world was a banquet laid out for his personal consumption. On this particular Tuesday night, the rain hammering against the panoramic windows of the Gilded Sparrow, Harrison was holding court. He was flanked by 2 friends, Blake and Carter, cut from the same bolt of expensive cloth. Their conversation was a loud, boorish symphony of stock portfolios, luxury cars, and the women they treated as disposable commodities. They were the kind of table every server dreaded, demanding, condescending, and utterly convinced of their own importance. Chloe was assigned their section. From the moment they sat down, Harrison seemed to make it his personal mission to make her night a living hell. He snapped his fingers to get her attention, a sound that made her flinch every time. He sent back a perfectly cooked steak, claiming it was a travesty. He questioned the vintage of a wine he had personally selected, his voice laced with a sneer that suggested she, a mere waitress, couldn't possibly comprehend its value. With each calculated slight, Chloe felt a piece of her carefully constructed composure chip away. She maintained her professional smile, her voice even and polite, but inside a quiet rage was simmering. She could feel the burn of humiliation on her cheeks, the sympathetic, pitying glances from her fellow servers. The final act of his performance came near the end of the meal. As Chloe reached across the table to refill Blake's water glass, Harrison shifted his chair back abruptly, his leg catching hers. It was a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it was enough. Chloe lost her balance for a fraction of a second. The crystal pitcher slipped from her grasp, and a cascade of ice-cold water drenched the sleeve of Harrison Davenport's $1,000 designer jacket. A sudden sharp silence fell over the table. The boisterous laughter died in their throats. Harrison looked down at his soaked arm as if he'd been doused in acid. He slowly, deliberately lifted his gaze to meet Chloe's. The look in his eyes was one of pure, unadulterated contempt. "You clumsy, incompetent girl." He began, his voice low and menacing, yet carrying across the now hushed restaurant. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. She opened her mouth to apologize, to explain, but he cut her off. He rose to his feet, a towering figure of indignation. He peeled off the drenched jacket and dropped it onto the floor with a flourish of disgust. "Look at this!" he bellowed, his voice now echoing through the cavernous room. Every diner had turned to watch the unfolding drama. Completely ruined. "Do you have any idea how much this costs?" "Of course you don't." Chloe stood frozen, mortified. I'm so sorry, sir. It was an accident." Harrison let out a short, incredulous laugh. "An accident? Your entire existence is an accident. People like you. You serve no purpose. You're just useless." The word hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Useless. It pierced through Chloe's professional armor and struck her to the core. It wasn't just an insult. It was a verdict, a brutal summation of her life from a man who knew nothing about it. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and shameful. But she fought them back, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Her manager, a perpetually flustered man named Mr. Dubois, scurried over, his face pale with panic. "Mr. Davenport, my deepest apologies. Please allow us to take care of everything. The meal is on the house, of course, and we will have your jacket professionally cleaned and restored." Harrison waved a dismissive hand. "I don't want it cleaned. I want her gone." He pointed a finger directly at Chloe, his expression unyielding. "I will not dine in an establishment that employs such useless people. Fire her. Now." Mr. Dubois looked from the furious billionaire's son to the devastated waitress. There was never any question of who he would choose. The Gilded Sparrow could survive the loss of one waitress. It could not afford to lose the patronage of the Davenports. "Chloe," Mr. Dubois said, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes avoiding hers. "Go to my office. We'll talk." But Chloe knew what that meant. There would be no talk. It was over. With as much dignity as she could muster, she turned her back on Harrison Davenport and the entire restaurant. She didn't look back as she walked away, but she could feel the weight of every eye on her, the silent judgment, the whispers. The one thing she couldn't block out was Harrison's voice now returned to its jovial, arrogant tone as he recounted the incident to his friends, turning her profound humiliation into a humorous anecdote for their amusement. In the sterile, impersonal office, Mr. Dubois handed her a final paycheck, the severance a pittance that would barely cover a week's groceries. He muttered something about maintaining standards and the importance of clientele. Chloe didn't hear him. The word useless was still ringing in her ears, a deafening, soul-crushing echo. She walked out of the Gilded Sparrow and into the cold, unforgiving rain. The city lights blurred through her tears. The gleaming towers that bore the Davenport name, now seeming to mock her. She was jobless, humiliated, and utterly alone. The weight of her sister's future, of the unpaid bills of her shattered dreams, pressed down on her with an almost physical force. As she trudged home, soaked to the bone, Chloe Sullivan had never felt more invisible, more insignificant, more utterly and completely useless. She had no idea that the man who had just destroyed her world had in fact just handed her the keys to a new one. The game had just begun. The following day was a study in grey. The rain had ceased, but a damp, oppressive gloom clung to the city, mirroring the bleakness that had settled over Chloe's soul. She didn't get out of bed. The thought of facing the world, of explaining to Sophie that she'd lost her job, was a mountain too high to climb. The word useless played on a relentless loop in her mind, each repetition stripping away another layer of her self-worth. It was one thing to feel invisible, to feel like a cog in a machine. It was another to be told so publicly and so cruelly that you had no value at all. Sophie, bless her 16-year-old heart, tried her best. She made Chloe burnt toast and weak tea, chattering about school and friends, in an attempt to fill the heavy silence in the apartment. Chloe offered weak smiles and monosyllabic answers, the effort of conversation feeling Herculean. She knew she couldn't hide from her reality forever. The final paycheck from the Gilded Sparrow was a ticking clock each second, bringing them closer to a precipice she refused to contemplate. On the second day, she forced herself out of the apartment. She couldn't stay locked in her misery any longer. With her old camera slung over her shoulder, she wandered aimlessly, letting her feet carry her through the labyrinthine streets of the city. She found herself in places she usually only passed through on her way to work, seeing them now with a photographer's eye, a seeker of stories. She walked for hours, her camera a shield against the world. It allowed her to be an observer, to be present without having to participate. Her meandering path eventually led her to Serenity Park, a small, often overlooked oasis of green nestled between towering skyscrapers. It was a place of quiet contemplation, a refuge for office workers on their lunch breaks, and elderly residents seeking a moment of peace. Chloe found a secluded spot on a low stone wall, watching the world go by. It was then that she saw him. An elderly man sat alone on a worn wooden bench, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. He was impeccably dressed in a classic tweed coat despite the mild weather, and held a beautifully carved wooden cane, though he didn't seem to lean on it. He was feeding pigeons from a small paper bag, his movements slow and deliberate. There was a profound sadness in his posture, a loneliness that seemed to radiate from him. Yet his face, when he turned slightly, held a remarkable kindness in its weathered lines. His eyes, a pale, startling blue, seemed to hold a century of stories. Without thinking, Chloe raised her camera. It was a candid shot, a private moment she felt almost guilty for intruding upon. But the image was too powerful to resist. The contrast of this solitary, gentle figure against the cold, impersonal backdrop of the city's financial district was a story in itself. She clicked the shutter, the sound barely audible in the quiet park. As if he'd heard it, the man looked up, his gaze locking directly with hers. Chloe froze, expecting annoyance or anger. Instead, his lips curved into a gentle, knowing smile. He beckoned her over with a slight nod of his head. Hesitantly, Chloe approached him. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice a little rusty from disuse. "I shouldn't have taken your picture without asking." "Nonsense," the man replied, his voice a soft, cultured rasp. "A good photograph is a moment of truth captured. There's no need to apologize for seeking truth." He patted the empty space on the bench beside him. "Please sit for a moment. The company would be welcome." Chloe sat, a strange sense of calm settling over her. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the pigeons. "You have a good eye," the man said, finally, gesturing towards her camera. "You see more than just what's in front of you. You see the story behind it." "I try," Chloe murmured. "It's the only thing that makes sense to me right now." He looked at her, his blue eyes perceptive. "You seem troubled, my dear. The world can be a harsh place for those with gentle souls." Something about his quiet, non-judgmental presence made Chloe feel safe. The story of her humiliation at the restaurant, the story she couldn't even bring herself to tell, Sophie tumbled out of her. She didn't mention Harrison by name, just a wealthy customer. But she recounted the incident, the cruelty of the words, the crushing finality of losing her job. The man listened patiently, his expression unchanging. When she finished, he simply nodded. "There are people in this world who believe that their wealth absolves them of the need for basic human decency," he said, his voice laced with a deep, weary sorrow. "They build their empires on foundations of arrogance and believe themselves to be kings. But a kingdom built on cruelty is a kingdom of sand waiting for the tide." He looked at her again. "Do not let the words of a hollow man define you. Your worth is not determined by his ignorance." He introduced himself simply as Mr. Gable, before standing up, his joints protesting with a soft groan. "It was a pleasure to meet you, young lady. I wish you well." And with that, he was gone. A solitary figure walking slowly towards the park exit. Chloe watched him go, feeling a strange sense of peace. The encounter was brief, almost dreamlike, but his words had been a balm to her wounded spirit. The next afternoon, just as Chloe was about to force herself to start scouring online job boards for another thankless waitressing position, there was a sharp rap on her apartment door. Standing outside was a professional courier holding a crisp, expensive-looking envelope. Confused, Chloe signed for it. Her name and address were printed in elegant, formal script. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, on heavy, cream-colored cardstock, was a letter from a law firm, Whitmore and Finch. The name was synonymous with old money and corporate power. The letter was formal and direct. It stated that their firm, on behalf of an anonymous client, wished to offer her a position. The position was described as a personal assistant and live-in companion. It came with a salary that made Chloe's eyes widen in disbelief. It was more than she made in an entire year at the Gilded Sparrow. The letter concluded by stating that she had come to their client's attention through a personal recommendation, and that an interview had been scheduled for her the following morning at their downtown offices. Chloe read the letter 3 times, her mind reeling. It had to be a mistake, or a scam. Who would offer her, a fired waitress, such a position? A personal recommendation from whom She knew no one who moved in circles that would require the services of a firm like Whitmore and Finch. The anonymity of the client was unsettling, a red flag waving in her mind. Yet the desperation of her situation was a powerful counterargument. What did she have to lose? Driven by a mixture of deep suspicion and a sliver of hope, Chloe decided to go. She spent the evening carefully ironing her one good blouse and skirt, her mind a whirlwind of questions. Could this be real? Was it possible that her luck was about to change so dramatically? The next morning, she stood before the imposing glass and steel skyscraper that housed the offices of Whitmore and Finch. Taking a deep breath, she entered the lobby, her sensible shoes clicking nervously on the polished marble floor. The law firm occupied the top 3 floors. The reception area was a picture of understated, intimidating wealth, dark wood, supple leather, and original modern art. A receptionist directed her to a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. A woman stood to greet her, her hand outstretched. She was in her late 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and an impeccably tailored suit. "Ms. Sullivan, I'm Evelyn Reed. Please have a seat." Ms. Reed was professional to a fault. She asked Chloe a few standard interview questions about her background and work ethic, her gaze analytical and probing. Chloe answered honestly, feeling hopelessly out of her depth. Finally, Chloe couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. "Ms. Reed," she began, "can you tell me who my potential employer is? Who recommended me for this position?" A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Ms. Reed's lips. "My client wishes to remain anonymous for the time being. As for the recommendation, let's just say he was impressed by your character and resilience in a challenging situation." The lawyer's words sparked a flicker of recognition. A challenging situation. Could she possibly be referring to the incident at the restaurant? How would anyone know about that? And then another memory surfaced, the kind old man in the park. Mr. Gable, his perceptive eyes, his wise words. Could it be him? The idea seemed fantastical absurd. He was just a lonely old man feeding pigeons. Ms. Reed seemed to read the confusion on Chloe's face. "The position is real, Ms. Sullivan. The salary is as stated. The role would require you to provide companionship and assistance with daily tasks for an elderly gentleman. It also requires you to live in a provided residence." She pushed a contract across the desk. "You can take your time to review this, or you can sign it now and we can arrange for you to be taken to your new home immediately." Chloe's head was spinning. This was insane. It was a leap into the unknown, a blind jump off a cliff. But what was her alternative? A return to the endless cycle of low-wage jobs, of scraping by, of living in constant fear of the next unexpected bill. She thought of Sophie. She thought of her photography. She thought of the word useless. Her desperation warred with her caution. The lawyer's professional demeanor, the legitimacy of the firm, the sheer impossibility of it all, somehow coalesced into a single crazy thought. What if this was her one chance, a chance to escape, to start over, to prove Harrison Davenport and the world wrong? "Where would I be living?" Chloe asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ms. Reed's smile widened slightly. "In the penthouse of the Sovereign Tower." Chloe gasped. The Sovereign Tower was one of the most exclusive, most expensive residential buildings in the city, a gleaming spire of glass and steel that scraped the clouds. It was an icon of wealth and power, and it was owned and developed by none other than Davenport Holdings. The irony was so thick, so bitter, it was almost comical. Taking the pen in her trembling hand, Chloe Sullivan made a decision. She signed the contract. It was a signature that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone involved in that fateful night at the Gilded Sparrow. She was stepping into a gilded cage, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in days: hope. The ride to the Sovereign Tower was a blur. Chloe sat in the back of a black town car, the city's familiar streets looking alien and distant through the tinted windows. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, a rhythm of disbelief and trepidation. The contract, a heavy document now tucked into her worn handbag, felt like a ticket to another dimension. When the car pulled into the private gated entrance of the tower, a uniformed doorman rushed to open her door, addressing her as Ms. Sullivan, with a deference that was both startling and deeply unsettling. Evelyn Reed escorted her through the lobby, a cavernous space of gleaming marble modern sculpture and hushed reverent silence. It was less a lobby and more a temple dedicated to the worship of money. They bypassed the main elevators, using a private key card to access a dedicated lift that shot upwards with silent, breathtaking speed. The numbers climbed 30, 40, 50, finally stopping at PH. The penthouse. The elevator doors opened directly into the apartment, and Chloe stepped out, her breath catching in her throat. The space was immense, a palace in the sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire floor, offering a stunning 360-degree panorama of the city. The sun was beginning to set, and the skyline was ablaze with hues of orange, pink, and gold. The furnishings were a masterclass in modern luxury, sleek minimalist furniture. A grand piano in one corner, and walls adorned with art that Chloe recognized as being from famous contemporary artists. The sheer scale of the place was overwhelming. It was larger than her entire apartment building. This is where I'm supposed to live," Chloe stammered, turning to Ms. Reed. "This is your new home." "Miss Sullivan," the lawyer confirmed, her tone matter-of-fact. "Your personal belongings from your old apartment will be packed and delivered tomorrow. We've taken the liberty of providing a preliminary wardrobe for you, which you'll find in the master suite. Feel free to supplement it as you see fit using the provided expense account." An expense account. A master suite. It felt like a scene from a movie, and Chloe was an actress who hadn't been given her script. She wandered towards the windows, drawn by the mesmerizing view. The city sprawled beneath her, like a glittering circuit board. She could see the faint outline of Serenity Park, a tiny patch of green amidst the concrete and steel. And not too far from it, the smaller, less imposing building that housed the Gilded Sparrow. From up here, it was insignificant, a tiny forgotten detail in a vast landscape. "Where is my employer?" Chloe asked, her voice quiet. "Where is Mr. Gable? He is waiting for you on the terrace, Ms." Reed gestured towards a set of glass doors. Chloe pushed one open and stepped out into the crisp evening air. The terrace was a garden in the sky filled with lush greenery, comfortable seating, and a small, elegant fountain. And there, sitting in a wheelchair and wrapped in a soft cashmere blanket, was the man from the park. Mr. Gable. He looked smaller, more fragile than she remembered, but his pale blue eyes were just as sharp, just as kind. He was looking out at the sunset, a soft, melancholic smile on his face. "Hello again, Chloe," he said, his voice the same gentle rasp. "I trust your journey was comfortable." Chloe's mind was a maelstrom of confusion. "It was you," she whispered, the pieces clicking into place. "The letter, the job. It was all from you, but why and how did you—" "How did I find you?" he finished for her. "I have my ways, my dear. When one has sufficient resources, information is a readily available commodity. He gestured to the chair opposite him. Please, sit. Chloe sat her gaze fixed on the man who had so inexplicably and so dramatically altered the course of her life. I imagine you have a great many questions, he said. I don't even know where to begin, she confessed. Why me? Why this? All of this? She gestured vaguely at the opulent penthouse, the city lights beginning to twinkle below them. And your name. It's not just Gable, is it? A shadow passed over the man's face, a flicker of a long-buried pain. No, he said softly. My full name is Alistair Gable, and this he patted the arm of his wheelchair. This penthouse, this building, it should have been mine. Chloe stared at him, uncomprehending. Decades ago. Alistair began, his voice taking on a narrative quality, as if recounting a story he had told himself 1,000 times. I was a young man with a vision, not unlike your Mr. Davenport. We were partners once, friends even. We started a construction company from the ground up. I was the architect, the dreamer. Jonathan, he was the numbers man, the strategist. He was brilliant and ruthless. He paused, taking a sip of water from a glass on the table beside him. Our company was Gable and Davenport. We were on the cusp of greatness. Our magnum opus was to be this very building, the Sovereign Tower. It was my design, my dream. But Jonathan saw a faster, more profitable path, a path that didn't include me. He engineered a hostile takeover using shell corporations and manufactured debt to squeeze me out. He forged documents, bribed officials. He destroyed my reputation and took everything. My company, my dream, my name. He rebranded as Davenport Holdings and built his empire on the foundations of my ruin. Chloe listened, captivated and horrified. The story seemed too dramatic to be real, a tale of corporate espionage and betrayal from a bygone era. I left the city. Alistair continued, his gaze distant. I had lost the will to fight. I traveled, lived a quiet, reclusive life, and let the world believe I had simply faded away. But I never stopped watching him. I watched as he became a titan, a king. I watched as he raised his son Harrison in his own image, arrogant, entitled, and utterly devoid of empathy. He turned his piercing blue eyes back to Chloe. I was in the Gilded Sparrow that night, Chloe. I was dining alone in a quiet corner booth. I saw the whole thing. I saw the casual cruelty, the disgusting display of privilege. But more importantly, I saw you. I saw the way you held your head high. I saw the fire in your eyes, the dignity you maintained in the face of abject humiliation. And in that moment, I saw the perfect instrument for my final act. An instrument? Chloe repeated, a chill running down her spine. What do you mean? My health is failing, my dear. Alistair said, his tone frank. The doctors tell me I have months, perhaps a year at most. I have spent the last decade quietly gathering evidence of Jonathan Davenport's corruption, the real stories behind his so-called legitimate business practices, the bribes, the kickbacks, the lives and businesses he has destroyed to get to the top. I have a mountain of it. But I am a ghost, a recluse. I cannot move in his world anymore. He leaned forward slightly, his expression intense. That is where you come in. I have given you a new life, a new identity. You are no longer Chloe Sullivan, the waitress. You are Chloe Sullivan, my mysterious protégé. You live in the most coveted penthouse in a Davenport building. You have the resources, the wardrobe, the access. You will move in their circles, You will attend their galas, their charity events. You will be my eyes and my ears. The true nature of the job offer settled over Chloe with a terrifying weight. This wasn't about companionship. It was about revenge. She was a pawn in a billionaire's vengeful endgame. "You want me to spy on them?" she said flatly. "I want you to help me serve justice," Alistair corrected gently. Jonathan Davenport built his empire on a throne of lies. His son believes the world owes him everything. I want to show them both the true cost of their actions. I want to teach that boy a lesson in humility, a lesson his father so clearly failed to impart. And I want to expose Jonathan for the fraud that he is. Chloe was profoundly conflicted. A part of her, the part that still burned with the humiliation of being called useless, felt a thrill of vindication. The idea of turning the tables on Harrison Davenport, of being instrumental in the downfall of the man who had so casually ruined her, was a potent lure. It felt like justice, like cosmic retribution. But another part of her was terrified. This was a world of immense power and danger. She was a photographer, not a spy. The deception, the moral ambiguity of it all, felt like a heavy cloak she wasn't sure she could wear. I don't know if I can do that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm not like them. I don't know how to lie to deceive people." Alistair reached out and placed his frail, trembling hand over hers. His touch was surprisingly warm. "That is precisely why you are perfect, Chloe. You are not like them. You have integrity. You have a good a good heart. You will not be corrupted by this world. You will simply be a mirror reflecting its own ugliness back at it. Think of it," he said, his voice compelling, "as the greatest photograph you will ever take. A picture that captures the truth, no matter how ugly, and exposes it to the light." He looked at her, his expression pleading. "I am an old, dying man, Chloe. This is my last chance to right a lifetime of wrongs. To ensure that men like Jonathan and Harrison Davenport do not get to write the final chapter. Help me. Help me give this story a just ending." Chloe looked from Alistair's frail, determined face to the glittering city below. A city run by men like Davenport. A city where hard-working people could be dismissed and destroyed on a whim. She thought of her sister Sophie and the future she could now provide for her. She thought of her own shattered dreams and the unexpected, terrifying opportunity she had been given to rebuild them into something stronger. It was a gilded door, yes, but the door was open, and outside the possibility of justice and revenge was waiting. Taking a deep breath, Chloe Sullivan made her choice. She would play her part in Alistair Gable's theatre of revenge. The weeks that followed were a surreal immersion into a life Chloe could never have imagined. Under Alistair's tutelage, her world expanded at an exponential rate. Her days were no longer defined by the repetitive rhythm of restaurant service, but by a carefully curated education in the art of being wealthy. Alistair, despite his physical frailty, possessed a mind as sharp as a diamond. He was a patient and exacting teacher. He hired tutors who taught her about global finance, art history, and wine pairings. She learned the subtle, unspoken language of high society, the difference between old money and new. The correct way to address a dignitary, the art of deflecting a personal question with graceful ease. She read the financial journals and the society pages, memorizing the names and faces of the city's power players, the very people she used to serve. The most transformative part of her education, however, was in her appearance. The expense account Ms. Reed had mentioned was real and seemingly limitless. Chloe, guided by a personal stylist Alistair hired, replaced her worn-out wardrobe with designer clothes, elegant shoes, and jewelry that was worth more than her old apartment. Looking at her reflection was a jarring experience. The woman staring back at her was a stranger, poised, sophisticated, and radiating a quiet confidence that was both foreign and intoxicating. She learned that clothes were not just clothes in this world. They were armor, a uniform that signaled her station and demanded respect. Throughout this metamorphosis, her camera remained her anchor to her true self. Alistair encouraged her photography, even converting one of the penthouse's spare rooms into a state-of-the-art dark room for her. She documented her new life, not just the glittering surfaces, but the strange emptiness she often felt amidst the opulence. She took portraits of Alistair, capturing the wisdom and sorrow in his eyes. These photographs were her diary, a way of processing the dizzying changes and holding on to the Chloe she was before. Her first major test came a month into her new life. Alistair, through his network of contacts, secured her an invitation to the annual Starlight Charity Gala, one of the most exclusive events on the city's social calendar. It was a known favorite of the Davenport family. "Jonathan will be there," Alistair told her as she stood before him in a stunning midnight blue evening gown. "He will be holding court, but it is not him I want you to focus on. It is his son. Observe him. Listen. People, especially arrogant young men, become careless when they are trying to impress a beautiful woman." Walking into the grand ballroom of the hotel where the gala was held felt like stepping back onto the stage at the Gilded Sparrow, but this time she was a member of the cast, not a stagehand. The air buzzed with champagne-fueled conversation and the clinking of jewelry. Heads turned as she entered. She was an unknown, a new face in a world where everyone knew everyone else, and her beauty and poise made her an object of immediate curiosity. She found Harrison Davenport exactly where Alistair predicted he would be, at the center of a laughing, adoring circle, a glass of champagne in his hand. He looked just as she remembered, handsome, arrogant, and utterly at ease in his natural habitat. Chloe played her part. She allowed herself to be introduced to people in his vicinity, her smile enigmatic, her conversation light and intelligent. She felt his eyes on her several times before he finally detached himself from his coterie and approached her. "I don't believe we've met," he said, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone. He looked directly at her, his eyes appraising her from head to toe. There was not a flicker of recognition in his gaze. To him, she was just another beautiful woman to be conquered, the waitress from the restaurant. The useless girl he had crushed without a second thought was so far beneath his notice that she didn't even register as a memory. The realization was both insulting and incredibly freeing. It gave her power. "Chloe," she said, extending her hand, her voice betraying none of the turmoil inside her. "Chloe Sullivan." "Harrison Davenport," he replied, holding her hand a moment longer than necessary. "What brings a new star into our familiar constellation?" "Chloe." "A change of scenery," she replied, coolly retrieving her hand. The old one was becoming rather predictable. Her aloofness, so different from the fawning attention he was used to, clearly intrigued him. For the rest of the evening, he sought her out, trying to pierce her mysterious facade. He boasted about his father's latest real estate deal, name-dropped celebrities he knew, and tried to impress her with the sheer scale of his wealth. Chloe listened, nodding politely, offering little about herself. She was a blank canvas onto which he could project his own ego. And as he talked, she gathered. She learned about an upcoming deal to acquire a piece of waterfront property, a deal that sounded suspiciously aggressive. He let slip the name of a city councilman, Robert Maxwell, whom he described as being in my father's pocket. He complained about a pesky environmental group that was trying to block one of their developments, laughing as he mentioned the creative legal strategies their firm, Whitmore and Finch, was employing to silence them. The irony of him mentioning the very law firm Alistair was using was not lost on Chloe. She reported every detail back to Alistair, who would listen intently, his fingers steepled, fitting each new piece into the vast, intricate puzzle he was building. Chloe became a regular fixture on the high society circuit. She was seen at gallery openings, polo matches, and exclusive parties. And Harrison was her constant shadow. He was relentless in his pursuit, showering her with invitations and gifts, fascinated by the one woman who didn't seem to want anything from him. It was a dangerous, exhausting game of deception. Chloe had to be constantly vigilant, always playing the part of the enigmatic, independently wealthy woman Alistair had created for her. The lies felt heavy on her tongue, and she lived in constant fear of making a mistake, of letting her mask slip and revealing the terrified waitress underneath. But a strange and unwelcome complication began to arise. As she spent more time with Harrison, forced to endure his company, to gather information, she began to see fleeting glimpses of the man behind the arrogant facade. She saw it in the way he talked about his late mother, a rare moment of genuine sadness in his eyes. She saw it in his desperate, almost pathetic need for his father's approval. Jonathan Davenport was a cold, demanding patriarch, and Harrison seemed to live his entire life in a state of anxious performance, constantly trying to measure up to an impossible standard. One evening after a particularly lavish party, he drove her back to the Sovereign Tower. He seemed subdued, the usual bravado stripped away. "Do you ever feel like a fraud?" he asked suddenly, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. The question hit Chloe like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" she asked, her own fraudulence, feeling suddenly acutely exposed. "All this—" He gestured at the opulent city streets. "The parties, the money, the name. It's not mine. I didn't build it. I'm just living in my father's shadow. Sometimes I wonder if there's anything about me that's actually real." In that moment, he wasn't Harrison Davenport, the billionaire's heir. He was just a young man, lost and struggling under a weight she could suddenly surprisingly understand. A flicker of empathy, unwanted and dangerous, sparked within her. She saw not the monster who had humiliated her, but a victim of his own gilded cage. She quickly suppressed it, reminding herself of her purpose, of Alistair's trust, of the word useless. But the crack had been made. Her mission, which had once seemed a clear and righteous path of vengeance, was now clouded by the messy, complicated reality of human emotion. She was playing a long game, a game of retribution orchestrated by a dying man. But she was starting to fear that in this game there would be no real winners, only varying degrees of loss. The path to Harrison's downfall was also a path that was forcing her to confront the uncomfortable truth that even monsters are sometimes painfully, tragically human. The autumn air grew colder, and with it, Alistair's health began its final rapid decline. The spark in his pale blue eyes dimmed, replaced by a peery resignation. His body was failing, but his mind, the mind of the master strategist, remained sharp, focused on the endgame. One evening, as Chloe sat reading to him by the fireside in the vast penthouse living room, he held up a frail hand to stop her. "It's time, Chloe," he said, his voice a thin, reedy whisper. The words hung in the quiet room, heavy with implication. For the next 2 days, the penthouse was transformed into a war room. Alistair, from his bed, which had been moved into the main living area to afford him a final view of the city he had once hoped to shape, directed the final assault. Chloe worked alongside Evelyn Reed, the formidable lawyer collating years of Alistair's painstaking research with the fresh intelligence Chloe had gathered. There were offshore account numbers, recordings of incriminating conversations Harrison had carelessly engaged in, and sworn affidavits from former Davenport Holdings employees who had been silenced and discarded over the years. Chloe's photographs of documents snapped discreetly at parties on her phone proved to be crucial connecting links. It was a mountain of evidence, an avalanche poised to crash down on the Davenport empire. Alistair chose his weapon with precision. Not a tabloid, but the country's most respected financial journal. He had maintained a discreet, decades-long relationship with its editor-in-chief, a man known for his bulldog tenacity and unimpeachable integrity. Evelyn Reed delivered the package of evidence herself. The story broke on a Thursday morning. It was a bombshell. The front page exposes, titled "The House of Davenport, A Legacy of Lies," was a methodical, brutal dismantling of Jonathan Davenport's public persona. It detailed the fraudulent origins of his company, the sabotage of Alistair Gable, and a litany of subsequent crimes, bid-rigging bribery of public officials like Councilman Robert Maxwell, and the use of shell corporations to evade taxes and environmental regulations. The article was supported by scanned documents, bank records, and direct quotes from Alistair Gable himself, breaking his decades of silence. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. By the time the stock market opened, Davenport Holdings' stock was in free fall. It plummeted with a speed that sent shockwaves through the financial world. The district attorney's office, citing the journal's investigation, announced a formal criminal inquiry. The empire, which had seemed so invincible, so permanent a fixture on the city's skyline, began to crumble. Chloe watched the news reports on the giant television screen in the penthouse, a numb, hollow feeling in the pit of her stomach. She had wanted this. She had worked for this. But the reality of the destruction, the sheer scale of the ruin, was sobering. This was not a simple act of revenge. It was the annihilation of a legacy affecting thousands of employees and investors. That evening, her private elevator chimed. She knew who it would be. She opened the door to find Harrison standing there. He was a ghost of his former self. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face was pale and drawn, and his eyes, usually so cold and arrogant, were now filled with a maelstrom of confusion, betrayal, and a deep, raw pain. He had clearly bribed the doorman to gain access. "It was you," he said, his voice hoarse. He walked into the penthouse, his gaze sweeping across the opulent space. He finally looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, the memory clicked into place. "The restaurant. You were the waitress." Chloe simply nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "My God," he whispered, a bitter, broken laugh escaping his lips. "This whole time, all of it, it was a lie. You were playing me." "You called me useless," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You destroyed my life for a moment of sport. You didn't just spill water on a jacket, Harrison. You tried to extinguish a person. Did you ever for 1 second think about what happened to me after I was fired?" He had no answer. The question had obviously never occurred to him. He saw the world only through the lens of his own experience. "He used you," Harrison said, gesturing vaguely in the direction of Alistair's room. "Alistair Gable. He was my father's partner. He filled your head with stories, turned you into his weapon. He gave me a chance when your world discarded me." Chloe countered, her voice rising with an emotion she could no longer contain. "He showed me that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account or their family name. Yes, he wanted revenge, but he also wanted justice. Your father built his kingdom on the ruins of other people's lives. Did you ever stop to think about that? The confrontation was raw, stripped of all pretense. It was filled with accusations and anger, but beneath it, there was a painful honesty. Chloe saw the boy who was desperate for his father's approval, now grappling with the monstrous truth of who that father really was. And he saw for the first time the resilient, intelligent woman he had so carelessly dismissed. 2 days later, Alistair Gable passed away peacefully in his sleep. His final view, the sunrise over a city where his name was finally publicly vindicated. Jonathan Davenport was arrested, his fall from grace complete and absolute. Alistair's will was read by Evelyn Reed the following week. It contained his final surprises. For Harrison there was no malice. Instead, Alistair had left him a single, sealed letter. Chloe never knew its exact contents, but Reed told her it was a letter not of condemnation, but of advice, urging him to find his own path to build a life of integrity and to learn from the sins of his father. To Chloe, Alistair had left everything else. The Penthouse, a trust fund so significant that it guaranteed her complete financial independence for the rest of her life, and a short personal note. It read, "My dear Chloe, you were never an instrument. You were the restorer of my faith in humanity. You have a good heart and a brilliant eye. Go now and frame the world in your own way. Show them the truth and beauty you see. Your story is your own now. Write it well. A.G." Months later, the harsh lights of a gallery shone down on a collection of black and white photographs. The exhibition was titled Invisible City, and it was Chloe Sullivan's first solo show. The images were the ones she had taken over the past year, poignant, raw portraits of the city's forgotten corners and unseen people. There were pictures of Sophie laughing. There were candid shots from the high society galas, capturing the loneliness behind the glittering facade. And in the center of the main wall, there was a powerful, striking portrait of an old man with kind, sad eyes, sitting on a park bench, feeding pigeons. Chloe, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, watched the crowd, a quiet sense of fulfillment washing over her. She was no longer a waitress or a spy. She was an artist, a woman of purpose, a woman who had faced down her own demons and rewritten her destiny. As the evening was winding down, a gallery assistant handed her a letter that had been delivered by a messenger. The envelope was plain with no return address. She opened it. The note inside was short, written in an unfamiliar hand. "Chloe, I saw the show. The pictures are incredible. They make you see things you never noticed before. I'm starting over. A small woodworking business. Building things with my own hands. It's hard, but it's real. It's mine. I'm sorry. For everything. And in a strange way. Thank you. H." Chloe folded the letter, a small, sad smile on her lips. She looked across the room and caught her reflection in the glass of a framed photograph. The woman looking back at her was strong, independent, and free. She had been trapped in a gilded cage, but she had used it to find her wings. Her story was finally her own. What a journey, from a humiliated waitress to the architect of a billionaire's downfall. Chloe's story is a powerful reminder that our true worth is never defined by the careless judgments of others. It's about the strength we find in our lowest moments and the unexpected paths that open up when we refuse to be broken. If this story of resilience, revenge, and ultimate redemption moved you, please let us know in the comments below. What was your favorite twist? Don't forget to hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support helps us bring these incredible stories to light. Thank you for watching.